The 1830 census declared that there were 12,866,020 people in the United States. Of that number, the same census also reported that 105,060 Indians who were living on tribal lands east of the Mississippi. The census showed that the Indians with less than 1% of the country's population occupied more than 10% of the eastern and southern lands of the country. In that same year, Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. After his signature, the new law authorized the president to make treaties with the Indians to exchange lands east of the Mississippi River for lands west of that river. Under the new law, the nation's armed forces would relocate as many as 100,000 Native Americans to the west. In theory, relocation was supposed to have been voluntary. In practice, great pressure was put on the Indian chiefs to sign removal treaties. By 1837, the Jackson administration had removed 46,000 Native American people from their lands and had secured treaties which would lead to the removal of a slightly larger number. At that time, Keokuk was the chief of the Sauk tribe in central North America. For decades, Keokuk was one of the most widely recognized Indian chiefs in the country. Soon after the signing of the 1830 removal law, Keokuk understood that the Indians had no chance of winning any battle against the white settlers. So, he determined that it would be better for his people to negotiate with the federal government the best terms he could get in exchange for his people's eastern lands for unoccupied western lands. Keokuk also negotiated annual payments in gold and silver for the lands. These payments became known as annuities. Keokuk's accommodations with the federal government made him popular with his own people because they got gold coins. The negotiations also made Keokuk popular with white settlers who got the new lands and did not have to bear the burden of fighting the Indians. Keokuk moved his tribe several times. As a matter of a good negotiation strategy, Keokuk always acted as an ardent friend of the Americans. Keokuk visited Washington, Philadelphia, and Boston. He was a good orator and he was very conscious of his public image. Some of the leading artists of that day painted Keokuk as a model of a good Indian chief. In August 1841, Keokuk and 100 other chiefs were camped for several days across the river from Nauvoo on that land that God only 3 months earlier had declared to be Zarahemla. A few years before, Keokuk had briefly met Joseph Smith when he received a copy of the Book of Mormon. During the first week of August, representatives of the Mormon Church crossed over to Iowa to meet Keokuk. They made detailed arrangements for a social event for Keokuk, and more than 100 fellow chiefs, together with their wives, would meet Joseph Smith and his people in Nauvoo. The Indians and the Mormons agreed on the details for an all-day event that was to be a summer festival of diplomacy, including food, music, and dance. The Indians would bring their drums and the Mormons their brass band. The arrangements were clear and agreeable to both sides. On the appointed morning of Thursday, August 12, the ferryman took 2 flatboats and 1 ferry over the river from Nauvoo to Montrose to get the Indian guests, whose total number was greater than 200. Joseph had pre-arranged for the city's brass band and a military unit to greet the arrival of this large group of Indians. These guests were at the time some of the most significant leaders of Native Americans in the country. Keokuk had a great sense of drama, and after he and his people came to the Nauvoo landing, they remained on the ferry and flatboats. Keokuk asked where was the leader of the Mormons. The welcoming committees said that Joseph Smith was waiting for them up the road in the grove. Keokuk said that he would not get off the ferry except that Joseph Smith was there to greet in person. A messenger immediately went to get the prophet, and after a short time, Joseph and Hiram came down to the landing to welcome Keokuk and his fellow chiefs to Nauvoo. For the rest of that day, there was a summer celebration in the grove. The Mormons offered the visitors their best dainties and fresh melons. The Indians entertained the Mormons with their drums and dancing. The Mormons entertained the Indians with their brass band and singing. This was a very significant event for both the Mormons and the Indians. For Joseph Smith, this was one of the most important social events of his life. He made a speech to as many as 500 people when announced that God had revealed to him that the Book of Mormon was an account of the fathers of Keokuk and his fellow Indian chiefs. This summer celebration in the Grove of Nauvoo would be remembered by the more than 200 Mormons who were there. An account of the day's activities was placed in the documentary History of the Church. The children of some of those members who were there would be so influenced by the telling of Keokuk's visit to Nauvoo that when the Mesa Temple was built in the 1920s, an artist would create a mural on the front wall of the reception area of the temple to depict the day of Thursday, August 12, 1841, when Chief Keokuk and his fellow chiefs came to visit Joseph Smith. On that mural, Chief Keokuk was receiving a copy of the Book of Mormon from Joseph Smith. At that time the prophet told the chief that the Book of Mormon contained the history of the American Indians and that Keokuk was a descendant of these people. Joseph Smith declared this as a direct revelation from God and thereby confirmed the truth of the Book of Mormon that was written to the Lamanites, who are a remnant of the house of Israel. The giving of his testimony was very important for Joseph Smith. Keokuk was the living embodiment of the people of the Book of Mormon. 12 years before, by the gift and power of God, Joseph Smith had translated the Book of Mormon, and on that day in the Grove, he had the opportunity to declare the importance of the book to the native people of America. This experience was very significant for the prophet and for the believers who were there in the Grove. The prophet made his clear declaration and told the chief who the people of the Book of Mormon are. Fortunately, Keokuk had children and those children have had children. There are today many living descendants of Keokuk. We intend to identify some of them. We are interested to learn more about Keokuk's actual DNA so that we will be able to ask experts to determine whether or not Keokuk's DNA is connected to people whom we know come from the Holy Land. A new proof of the Book of Mormon may be found in the bloodline of Keokuk, of whom Joseph Smith through revelation declared was a child of the Lamanites.